Thank you everyone for attending today. Very serious press conference, and I'm very excited and pleased to announce that SonOfChelsea are going to be competing to win the Paul Carnival Fantasy Premier League in 25-26. We are Chelsea. We are here to win. It's about winning silverware. It's about being the best. And I don't care if any others disagree. It's about being number one. It's about being the best. And that is just how it's going to play out during 25-26, unfortunately, for my competition. So if anyone has any questions, they can ask someone else. I'm here to win. So, that end of press conference. All jokes and bad acting aside, I am absolutely privileged to be a part of the Fantasy League for this year, which includes some incredible Chelsea creators, personalities, podcasts, etc. that I'm sure many of you know who I'll be competing against on a weekly basis to try and become the best. So Louis, Matisse, Eunice, watch out, because I'm going to be number one, at least of the YouTubers and podcasters, I guess. That is my aim. The Paul Carnival Foundation, which uses Paul's incredible life and career story to influence the drive, education, anti-racism and youth mentorship programs. Paul Carnival Foundation empowers young people facing adversities, including issues like racism, mental health challenges, trauma and exclusion from education. The foundation are focused on the values of allyship, belonging and community. And the great thing about this fantasy league, it's a free league, and the link below will take you to join the league and compete along with that. And there is a special donation link. Any support is greatly helped as we go through this season, and along with having the fun of the fantasy league, raising money for a great foundation as well. So get involved. Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again for another show. It's Q&A time. I've been talking about this for a while now and wanted to do a Q&A before we get into pre-season. I mean, it's not really a pre-season, is it, this year? From a Chelsea point of view, we effectively just have 2 games against Leverkusen and Milan, but we've had a little bit of time to decompress and to relax and enjoy being world champions before we dive back into the Premier League. And very kind of you to submit as many questions as you have. We've got a lot of interesting ones here, Chelsea related, but also some more Premier League based ones that I think are pretty intriguing to jump into. So please do like, subscribe. If you want to see more Chelsea content, please do follow the channel. Please do share the video and podcast around with friends. I just want to say a massive thank you once again for the support on the show recently. Has been really humbling. Seeing some of your very kind comments about the shows is also very nice and does make it all worth it. So thank you for the support, as we nearly are at the time of recording, nearly at 38k subs, which is a nice goal to hit, almost hitting the full attendance, the full capacity of Stamford Bridge, which is a pretty nice thing to do. Hopefully we can achieve that before we hit August. So once again, thank you for that. But let's jump into your questions. Firstly, here from Alexander, who says, with what seems like early signs of success of the recent signings, is it safe to say that the recruitment scouting is finally on track? Has their snap up young prospects strategy come good, or is it too early to tell if it's paid off? So in terms of the signings right now, and I guess you would add onto that the bulk of the squad that is performing well at the moment, I think it would be fair, and I think you would be it would be a credible argument to say it is paying off. Now, Chelsea have spent a lot of money. This is not, I don't think anyone, and this is not me singling out Chelsea, obviously. All top clubs spend money, despite what some people try and claim in the media, that there are at least there's only 2 clubs in English football who spend money, and you add Man United onto that, but everyone else, all the other big clubs, apparently don't spend money, and we just have to ignore it when they spend hundreds of millions of pounds. No, obviously Chelsea have spent a lot of money, and it's taken a substantial period of time to get to this place, and there has been collateral damage. There have been bad signings during the period, and at times it has felt frantic and chaotic. In my unpopular opinion show, there were kind of 2 extremes within that, right? That nothing has kind of changed and the project isn't justified because of the recent success, or Clearlake are wonderful. And I always just think either of those extremes are ridiculous. They really are, because when are we talking? When are you asking? What specific things are you asking about? Now, there absolutely is a justification that the recent signings, this summer's transfer business, if I'm just focusing on that, has been more logical and early success, yeah. I mean, the impact of João Pedro, his first few appearances for Chelsea, in terms of level of appearances for someone in their first weeks of Chelsea, ridiculously high. Unfortunately for João Pedro, and I don't mean this as like a criticism or fear-mongering, it probably can only go down from here. And if it doesn't, he's on to something ridiculous, really, because, obviously, really high level of performance, really great impact, and obviously part of a trophy win. And that's what he will have. And, to snap up the young prospects thing, obviously that has been a strategy. At times it has felt like mass strategy. And at times there have been successes that I kind of look at and go, was that part of some like really intricate, specific strategy, or was it just kind of fortune that we stumbled onto some players? Either way, Chelsea have got some very good players. And it's what it leads to, I think. I still think, especially because they committed to this, it in some ways lends to logically waiting a period of time, because you can't judge individual young players and young players as a group definitively only after a couple of months. I think the problem has been when Chelsea have spent as much as they have. I think the counter argument that I've made, that others have made in the past, whether you agree with it or not, I do think has merit, is if you're going to spend that much on players who are going to take time to develop, surely then you'd buy some players who are ready to impact things now. The argument that we made now, and from what we've seen with positive development, is the team now seems to be heading in a direction where they can actually impact things right now, and they are going to show positive signs. I think that the recruitment and the scouting, I think the scouting has been better, absolutely. I think we've identified some very good players. I think at times the recruitment has been shoddy. I think some of the players we've missed out on, I do think you can criticise the club for. Some of the players that we've actually bought, I still will criticise the club for the previous transfer windows. I mean, I do think still, with whatever happened in recent months, I still do think the past two transfer windows have been bad transfer windows. I still firmly believe that. And I don't think it's hypocritical to praise what's going on now and still look back at last summer and say, yeah, I think it was pretty horrendous, the recruitment. I think, overall, I think from where Chelsea were, I think maybe some of the signings that didn't really make an impact, who aren't even here now, or the likes of João Felix, for instance, spending that much, a player who barely spent 5 months at the club during the season. It just doesn't really add up. And, I think that we will see over the course of a whole season now, because it's been positive months, absolutely. The end of last season into the Club World Cup, we now will see a level, hopefully, that's a lot higher. So again, it's difficult to give a definitive answer. I am more positive right now about where Chelsea are heading and their squad construction than I was 12 months ago. And yeah, sure, people say it's all like it's a gotcha. Yeah, it's because on the pitch it looks positive. Yeah, that's kind of the point. Like, that's what we're judging, right? Like, it was my frustration when things were going wrong that people were getting annoyed at others like myself for criticizing what I'm watching, because all I can judge is what I'm watching. I can't judge mythically what may happen. Unfortunately I don't have the ability to look into the future. So Chelsea may now ride this wave and be going in a really, really positive elite direction. That's what we all hope. So yeah, we will see how that all shakes up, and I understand there is a lot more logic and evidence now to back up the idea that the recruitment is going in a good direction. Rectorf1 says here, would you take top 4, a lengthy run in the Champions League and a cup win at Wembley next season? Absolutely. I think a lengthy run in the Champions League would be wonderful. I think it would, although it probably would have some impact on our Premier League campaign. I think to go from not being in the Champions League and also having a group, it's not like when Chelsea in the past had missed out on the Champions League for like one season, but then we had a group of players that had played in the Champions League extensively before, kind of an older group of players. It's not like that, with Chelsea. It's not that none of our players have ever played Champions League football before. Some of them, in the case of Reece, went all the way to a Champions League final and lifted the thing. It's not about that. It's more a case of, a young group heading in together for the first time. Maresca as a coach heading into the Champions League for the first time as a head coach. And, if Chelsea in a new format as well, that's going to provide different challenges than the old format, can go in a lengthy run, I think it shows a real positive sign. Top 4 absolutely is kind of the expectation. And a cup win, listen, we need to at some point kill off this Wembley curse. I am so sick to death of going to Wembley. My joy of going to Wembley now, I have to find as a Chelsea fan joy at Wembley in different means to football, to Chelsea. Either going to watch England win kind of meaningless, kind of international friendlies that we're expected to win anyway, going to see concerts there, going to see AEW there, and hopefully WrestleMania there. I want to see Chelsea turn that arch blue, because it's just insane the amount of finals we've got or games we've got there, and it's turned out negative. In actual fact, games that Chelsea should have, that's the annoying thing. It's not like we've been battered in all of those games that Chelsea absolutely should have won. So yeah, I think that would be a very strong season. I don't know how many people could argue against that. Yes, in terms of silverware, we of course did win the Conference League. We did get top four, but you add in the context of getting far in the Champions League. And that top four might not be just a case of us scraping by in the top four. That might be a more comfortable top four. So yeah, I think that would prove, for me at least, to be a good, strong season. Suddenly Stan says here, with Sanchez's improved performance in the last part of the Premier League season and his heroic effort in the Club World Cup final, has he earned a chance to prove himself a worthy first choice for the start of the upcoming season? I think there is a likelihood he is now going to be the first choice, unless something really radical happens with us rekindling interest in Magnon or going out to sign another goalkeeper. I still believe that Chelsea, it's an area I'm still concerned about. I still think the jury is out on Robert Sanchez. I think the jury was kind of in on Robert Sanchez, and obviously it would be disingenuous and stupid of me to sit here right now and say, what he did in the Club World Cup doesn't matter. Like, his good performances doesn't matter. Like, no, that's dishonest. He had a very, very good, his best Chelsea performance in that Club World Cup final. And maybe like with other players, you can make the argument that the change in mentality has impacted a lot of players. And Rob Sanchez, when you look at Rob Sanchez's performances, when he cuts out the stuff that I always thought people were wrong to try and claim he was brilliant at, where kind of like short passing in and around his box is kind of something that I still, long passing, I think he's a lot stronger at, as we saw in the Club World Cup, as we saw against Wolves at the start of last season. When he cuts that stuff out and he does more of the basics, then yeah, he's not the worst goalkeeper on earth, but he does have rush of blood moments. He does have moments, even in the Club World Cup, that could cost us. That is still my concern. Kepa Arrizabalaga, for instance, could go on short runs, bursts of form, where he actually looked all right. But the longer the spotlight was on him, the harsher things got. And that is still my fear about Sanchez, and I don't think I'm being unfair there. What I'm judging is not weeks of form, it's judged on a long period of time. And still, the first season at Chelsea, the majority of his second season at Chelsea, versus, admittedly, some good months, even with some shaky moments within there, I think still lead me to think I'd prefer Chelsea strengthen that area. That's still my opinion. I think he will, on likelihood, go into the season. I can't say I'm overly confident about it. I just hope that the smaller chunk of evidence recently, the recency bias, is what leads into the new season. If it doesn't, I worry that will be the undoing of Chelsea once again. Because I think the rest of the group, I think there are a lot more positive signs of it growing. I'm not sure Sanchez, especially at his age now, he's not a young goalkeeper, although goalkeepers do have a longer sort of lifespan in football than outfield players. Still kind of ponder if there's going to be those kind of stupid moments that undermine his overall performance. Amit here asks, what would be your combined 11 from the top four last season based on current form? This is an interesting one, it really is. Because I still think, even on form, I know some people sort of argue about some of these players, right? But I think they're going to be quite obvious names here. The top four, just in case you forgot, of course, Liverpool win the Premier League title, Man City, Arsenal, Man City and Chelsea. I think Alisson, for me, out of the group of four goalkeepers there, four first-choice goalkeepers there, still has to be number one. I think he's an exceptional goalkeeper and has been for a long period of time. He's left the Premier League now, so I don't know, if this counts, but I do think overall, it's harsh, isn't it? Like, Reece James hasn't played that much, even as a right-back for Enzo Maresca. Man City's right-back position with Kyle Walker leaving and who's going to fill that position for the long term is still up for grabs there. Arsenal, Jurriën Timber, I know, played a lot there. But is he an elite level player? Yeah, I think that's a big question. Obviously, Ben White played a lot for Mikel Arteta and still probably could in that position as well. You come to Chelsea and it's like, again, Malo Gusto, overall form, had an amazing performance against PSG in a final, but overall form in the Premier League last season wasn't that great. So I still think Trent Alexander-Arnold, despite my criticisms of him defensively, and now, of course, no longer at Liverpool, I do think would go in there for me. I think the back two would be Saliba and Virgil van Dijk. I think Saliba's an exceptional defender. Virgil van Dijk has been the best, probably, Premier League central defender. How many years has he been at Liverpool now? But at least, a good chunk of time. Or one of the best. Marco Correa has to be in terms of left back. I think he was the best left back, or one of the strongest performing left backs, not only in the Premier League but in Europe for a substantial period of time now. Midfield, Caicedo and Declan Rice. I think Caicedo absolutely deserves his props. I think he's just been phenomenal for Chelsea. And Declan Rice too. I know he's developed into more of an adventurous midfielder, but I'm still a big fan of Declan Rice. And I'm not supposed to say that as a Chelsea fan, but I think he is a wonderful midfielder. And I think the debates around those two players just get tiresome. They're both brilliant midfielders. They're both very important for their team. Dominic Szoboszlai, I think, really developed at Liverpool last season as an attack-minded midfielder. He was such a big part of the way that Liverpool midfield under Slot would overwhelm teams, and he contributed a lot in the attack as well. And in the front three, Bukayo Saka is a wonderful footballer, but he did get injured for a long period of last season, and I thought maybe his form sort of tailed off and was impacted by that, which is understandable. Mohamed Salah is obviously going to be in this. Just absolutely ridiculous footballer in terms of the claims against him, like, oh, he doesn't do much for like a period of the game, and he just scores a lot of goals, as if that's some sort of like criticism, is just insane to me. He scores goals on a ridiculously frequent basis, even at an older age now. That makes him an amazing footballer. Erling Haaland, I still think, as if Newcastle were in the top four, I probably would have put Alexander Isak here, but of course they weren't. So Erling Haaland, I know last season wasn't great for him, but his numbers still were pretty respectable, weren't there? And I think Cole Palmer too. I know obviously he had a real dip in the season, but creatively the influence he has on that Chelsea team is just insane. And on current form, if you just watched his last performance, was insane too. Another Premier League related question here from Jay Cole. Who's your underrated player in the Premier League who deserves more love and attention? Mine is Ryan Christie from Bournemouth. Big fan of your content. Thank you, mate, for that. I've got a couple of names here, kind of mixing players of kind of prime age, younger age, who probably do deserve more respect, but also kind of career veterans who still are playing at a very decent level, despite maybe being dismissed, and obviously not going to make a big move to a big club because they're kind of near the end of their career, but I still think are performing at a decent level. Anthony Robinson, I think, is a very, very good left back for Fulham. If Chelsea weren't in for Jorel Hato, he probably would have been one of those names I'd look at as a rotational option. I think very good Premier League player. Kelleher from Liverpool, of course, he's moved from Liverpool to Fulham as a first choice goalkeeper now, and I think he was a brilliant rotational option for Liverpool, to Chelsea's detriment in a couple of cup finals, by the way. Was it 2 or 3? I can't remember. And I think proved to be a very good option for Jurgen Klopp, even for Arne Slot at times last season, because I think Alisson may have got injured. I think he's a very good level goalkeeper. And I think he'll prove that at Fulham. And I think the chance he now has to become an established number one, maybe in a year's time, he will be deemed if he really does prove to be a first choice, like a dominant first choice, you wonder how long he will remain at Fulham, because other clubs may come sniffing for him. And again, was a goalkeeper I looked at and went, should Chelsea be in for him? I think he is a very good player who, a bit like Emi Martinez, after being second choice for so long, it's always difficult as a goalkeeper because you're in a bottleneck. If you're at one of these big clubs and there's an established number one that you can't get in front of, you have to make a move because you're just going to be waiting for years. So now he has a chance to really show his stuff week in and week out. Nathan Collins at Brentford, I think he's probably an underrated defender. I think he's a very, very solid defender. Dan Burn, I think the story of Dan Burn is quite wonderful when you look at, just his profile and physique and the stereotypes that come with that, but the fact that even with a Newcastle that looks to progress, looks to improve consistently and challenge at the top levels of the Premier League, the goal he scored against Liverpool and the performance in that League Cup final was outstanding. So, it shows that unorthodox players and kind of, I guess you'd say, historic and kind of old profiles of English footballers can still thrive at this level despite the tactical and technical development, right? Danny Welbeck, I think, also deserves his flowers. I think, listen, there's been many jokes made about Danny Welbeck and demeaning him, especially earlier in his career. Sure, he never developed into an outstanding, astonishing centre forward that could maybe lead the line for England, but he was playing in an era with Harry Kane as well. But you look at the age he is now and the amount of goals he still scored for Brighton, still playing regularly for them, who are a top 10, probably going to be challenging this year for European spots, Premier League footballer. And Amadou Onana, who obviously made the move from Everton to Aston Villa. I really like Onana. I love the profile of him as a central midfielder. I think he perfectly suits Premier League football. And I think Frank Lampard understood that when he recruited him for Everton in the summer of 22, I think it was, when he brought him in. I think he just identified Frank, I think, as a good eye for players. And I think that Onana perfectly suited Everton. I think he perfectly suits what Unai Emery wants to do at Aston Villa. And again, probably one to watch this season. If Villa have a strong season, I think Onana will be a big part of that. So hopefully that answers your question. Matthew here asks, if Jackson leaves, would you take Sesko? Yeah, I probably would. I mean, it would take a lot of money. And it's weird that Benjamin Sesko, despite all of the kind of chat around him for many months, looks like he won't be making a move. I mean, maybe dominoes are about to fall with Alexander Isak potentially leaving Newcastle, and then they would go in for Sesko because Newcastle were having an awful time of it in the transfer window. But I can't see it though. I think Jackson, the money Chelsea are asking for Jackson, and also Sesko, you kind of ponder it sometimes, despite numbers and good reasons to think he's a young striker that will go on to bigger things. You do kind of ponder sometimes why teams aren't going in for him more concretely. Is it because of the price that Leipzig are asking for? Is it something else? Are scouts at top clubs looking at him and going, there's just something about him that maybe doesn't suit what we want to do, or maybe doesn't translate well to the Premier League? Kevin H asks, Dan, what would be your dream acquisition for this window? The player would have to not be currently in the squad. My dream acquisition would be Morgan Rogers. Other than ridiculous, because of course you could say Erling Haaland, you could say Mohamed Salah, you could say players who were not going to sign for Chelsea this summer, it would still be a goalkeeper. I think it would. I think it would be, when I say dream, right, again, realistic dreams, Mike Maignan would just make me very happy in terms of Chelsea's transfer business. It just would, because I think it would be a realistic but equal sign of serious intent. I think it would bring in a goalkeeper that would challenge. I think, Jorgensen or Sanchez, one of them would have to leave then. Undeniably, one of them would have to leave. And probably it would more likely, I think, be Robert Sanchez, because he'd probably have more admirers, as Matt Law reported about earlier in the summer. And maybe Jorgensen's more content at his age to stay as number 2. You can't really have, I think, all 3 of those goalkeepers in the squad. But I think it would, even with Mike Penders, it's about, stepping in for a goalkeeper who has a ton of experience, I think a leadership skill about him. So that's still mine. Morgan Rogers, I think, is a good Premier League player, and I think would be potentially a good signing for Chelsea, a strong signing for Chelsea. It was one of the first answers in today's show, right? And I think that's why really is what the team needs. A couple of more questions here. Time Lord Victorious, I still love that name. Question here: if it's obvious for us fans to take this team to the top, it needs a top centre-back and goalkeeper like Liverpool did with Van Dijk and Alisson. Why do you think our sporting directors so far have failed to see and act on this? I think it's a combination of just they are committing to their strategy, and you also have to factor in the wages thing, which I've disagreed with, right? And the reason I disagree with the wages, it seems like kind of self-imposed limit. And I'm not saying that Chelsea have not kind of bent on this. It's just, I kind of do think you're going to have to bend on it at some point. Because logically, if this young group, this goes back to the start of the podcast again, if this young group continues to get better, your own players, by probably bonuses you've had to put in, by having to improve their deals so they don't go to competitors, are going to be earning that money eventually. If they're not earning it at Chelsea and you're not winning top titles, they will be looking for it elsewhere, unless the wages of the rest of football at the elite level completely burst and everyone there's like a wage cap or something. That's the reality, unfortunately, at elite football. Then maybe there's a thinking at Chelsea that they don't really worry about that, and they think, well, even if those players leave, we can replace them with someone else. It's a risky strategy, but Chelsea, if they're successful, are going to be earning a lot of money. They already are earning a lot of money as one of the Premier League's biggest clubs. So yeah, I've always kind of that maybe that's why they've stayed away from doing that. And maybe as well, they look at the current squad and seen their development in recent months and think, we're trusting with what we're doing. And then it's about whether that turns out to be the right thing or not. I do ponder if that's going to change. Like, Liverpool eventually did make those kind of very precise signings that took a very good and I think promising squad under Jurgen Klopp, and because it was so obvious what needed to happen to that squad to take it up to the next level when they got to a Champions League final. Obviously for that squad was huge, but then two or three goalkeeping mistakes that really undermined them in that final. It was obvious you had to act, right? Because if you want to remain at this level, if you want to compete at this level, if you want to get over the line, which Liverpool eventually did, you need to invest. It may take something like that, but when you have the scenario at the Club World Cup where Rob Sanchez puts in a great performance, there's justification. Then go, well, you can see a line of thinking by Chelsea's sporting directors overall that think, well, we've been justified in our strategy. People will disagree with that. And at times, I think I would disagree with that everything they do is perfect. I don't think that at all. If the team keeps winning, then they are more justified. And you can't really argue against that. Even if your personal preferences may be different on certain players and how we got here was not always great, we got here. And, if Chelsea are winning the title, is anyone really going to be complaining? So yeah, maybe that's why. And we will see, if Chelsea, don't improve in the Premier League and are actually miles and miles and miles away from even challenging for the title, I do think a conversation will naturally come back to why. Because with all the money invested and the aim should be to get closer. I'm not saying winning the Premier League title. The aim should be getting closer. If we're further away from the Premier League champions than we were last season, yeah, that's not great. And maybe that argument will come back into force of like, why aren't you going for bigger players, ready-made players? Because other teams are around you. Other teams keep, going and spending loads. Look at what Liverpool are doing this summer. They aren't stopping anytime soon, and they're the champions currently. And the final question from Desmond here: do you think Morgan Rogers would be a smart addition to the Chelsea first team? If yes, where does he play based on the fact that Maresca likes to play with wingers that hug the touchline? Yeah, I mean, I do think he would be a good addition, and I think it ties into Xavi Simons at the moment. Like, I think Xavi Simons will be the Morgan Rogers signing, basically. I think that's probably what's happened. I ponder if Chelsea have tried to look at Morgan Rogers, and maybe there was something with Jackson there going in separate deals, and that just isn't a realistic fee, and they've been probably quoted a big fee for Rogers, understandably from Aston Villa's perspective. And Chelsea are like, no, actually, there's this opportunity with Xavi Simons who wants to leave Leipzig this summer, and we can get it over the line and maybe a cheaper fee than Rogers, and there is a clear quality player there. And as I've explained consistently, I do think at least the evidence of the Club World Cup, there is a reality maybe when Maresca reverts to what he does in the Premier League last season, and we suddenly are then seeing really wide players again, and he isn't varying up with inside forwards. I think, based on what we saw in the Club World Cup, my mind kind of thinks he's evolving the system for the Premier League as well. I don't just think it's based on maybe the convenience of the tournament. Evidence will show whether that's right or wrong, but I think that shows the need to be more flexible, and why players like Rogers, why João Pedro I think was recruited, why I think they're going after Xavi Simons, and the way in which the team can kind of shapeshift. I wrote about this in my Substack. I think shapeshift, I think it's the dual purpose of having the depth that you need, quality depth, to deal with a season that's going to be challenging, but also with that depth comes variety and the ability to change dependent on the opponent. And if things aren't working, Maresca has other tools at his disposal. You don't want to become the shallow, predictable team that Chelsea did during the worst months of the season last year, where it was, Chelsea just looked stale, and it's about trying to avoid that and mitigate that risk as much as possible. So I don't think trying to mitigate that is silly, and I don't think players like Rodgers, even going for a player like Rodgers, outsiders may go, oh, it makes no sense, but I think if you've watched Chelsea in the Club World Cup, I do think positionally it does make sense. So that is it for the Q&A. Thank you so much for submitting all your questions. Hopefully we'll do this again pretty soon, maybe next month as we head into the Premier League season. Like, subscribe, share the show around with friends, follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.